I'm sure I got some people watching this video that's a fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, Ogre Battle, Advance Wars, those older games that was made around the 90s that a lot of people really gravitate towards. They have a lot of excitement for. If you like those games, I think I got a game for you. It's called Symphony of War. It's made by Dancing Dragon Games and published by Freedom Games. Want to shout out them for sending me the review code. And this is my review on Symphony of War for Steam. Let's get on with it. What's going on, you guys? Lord Addict here, coming at you for another review. You guys know that I'm a huge fan of turn-based games. I'm a really big fan of JRPGs in general, and I do got a game that kind of mixtures those two together. Now, for those of you that played the old Tactics Ogre games, I think a lot of people, when it comes to this type of gameplay, that grid-style gameplay, we're always looking for new fixes on this type of gameplay because it's a very unique thing that I don't think a lot of people take advantage of. So when we was at PAX this year, there was a game in particular that Lord Addict wanted to get his hands on. It was called Symphony of War. It's pretty much a turn-based game that's kind of like squad-based. You know how when you're looking at it, think of like Fire Emblem, you know, gameplay such as that. Now there is a few things I want to go over real quick before we get into this. Now we all love Tactics Ogre, and I think that this game kind of inspires by Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics. Now, especially when it comes to the soundtrack, I feel like the soundtrack is very heavenly Final Fantasy Tactics like, and I really enjoyed that. I feel like, you know, we got a good thing of both worlds. Now, as far as the story goes, let's go ahead and start with that. Now, I honestly feel like the story of this game is very good. Like, and I can't really begin to describe to you how good this game is in terms of story. Like, now you guys know how I don't really go into too much of a detail, but here's pretty much what it is. Like, think of Game of Thrones. Think of, you know, giant wars going on. You're in the middle of all this chaos and there's betrayals going on. There's a lot of plot twists. The story of this game, I would say, if I would have put like a number on it, would be like maybe, like I would say a solid 8 to 9 out of 10. I felt very interested in what's going to happen next in this story. They had a lot of good side characters, a lot of good side quests that happened in this game. I will say that the side quest was a little bit less appealing in this game than I would have liked. And what I mean appealing is there wasn't a lot of it. Now, there was a good amount. There was about one chapter where it was pretty much like, look, you can do the main story, you can do all these side quests. I would have really preferred that they went and let you have a lot more aspects in terms of side content where you can do something in almost every chapter, and maybe a little bit of cause and effect when it comes to the story. For the most part, you're going to play the game exactly how the story is written. There's not really any kind of choice, and that's not really anything like bad against the game. I know a lot of you probably playing Fire Emblem stuff, you know, games that's similar to this type of gameplay, and there's a lot of choice diameters that go on in those type of games. So if you're really expecting that in this game, it's not really present in this game. All you can expect when it comes to story is they give you a solid foundation, solid side characters, solid villains in the game, and you're going throughout the game learning more and more about the lore of this country that is have all of this beef. There's so much beef in this game, it's unreal. It's like I said, there's a bunch of betrayals and a lot of story aspects in general. Now, as far as the performance, I do have a pretty beefy PC, and I don't think this game is going to take much to run on PC, and I had very few actual like game breaking bugs. There were occasional stuff that I had like reset and stuff like that, but it wasn't enough to make me feel like it impacted my experience in this game. The music in this is actually one of the highlights of it. Now, there's a lot of different emotional ties going on here, and it's like I said earlier in the video, I felt very Final Fantasy Tactics soundtracks on this. Now, is it one for one? No, of course not, but you know, go ahead and look at that. Now, I'm not going to put it on the video itself because I don't know how it goes with copyright and stuff like that, but if you put some of these soundtracks next to like an old Final Fantasy Tactics soundtrack, they sound a lot similar, especially some of the shock factor music in this game. And you know, in general, if you have anything being compared to Final Fantasy Tactics soundtrack, you know, it's definitely a good start. And I think that the soundtrack of this game is a very solid thing. Now, I'm not saying every song on here sounds like Tactics, but there are a couple that kind of do. Now, let's get into the gameplay. You guys know with this type of game, this Ogre Battle, Final Fantasy Tactics, Red Emblem, you know, a lot of the times the gameplay is the make it or break it stuff. And what I will say is a lot of these type of games don't really go away from that grid space. But there are some unique things in here. I feel like they took some of that Final Fantasy Tactics and Ogre battle, and they kind of mixed it with the red emblem, fire emblem I meant. So look, this is how it pretty much goes. Now, typically when you play these type of games, how they normally goes, you have a grid space gameplay with unique units, individual units that you build up to fight with everyone that kind of resembles an actual squad. Now, the way Symphony of War works is actually you have individual units that you build a squad with them that they fight together as an army. Now, I know that kind of sounds weird. I'm going to put it in the background where you can see a little bit more on what I'm saying. Every unit has a select amount of people that they can have on their team, and you can eventually level up the amount of people that you can have on the team. Now, it is a 3x3, so you can only have a max of 9 people on the field. I know 9 doesn't sound like a lot for one squad, but after you start accumulating a lot of people, that is a lot that you won't really get to. I think I only had one squad in this entire game that actually had 9 units in the squad, because most of these units that you want synergy. You want certain abilities work better with other abilities. Certain classes are weakness or strengths against other classes, and you want to make sure you have a good synergy on the battlefield. You want to have a squad that does archery. You want to have a squad that does cavalry. You want to have a squad that does spears so they can take on the cavalry. Like, it has a huge in-depth gameplay on this game, and the longer you play it, the more you unlock these more advanced classes of these respected units. And I really enjoy that, especially when you start getting further in the game and they start showing you dragons. Yes, I said it, dragons. You know, and what's cool about the dragons portion is you can actually level them up from, you know, a small dragon to a medium-sized dragon to a full-blown dragon. And if you really invest into that unit, you can eventually have people riding on the dragons. And that's probably one of the most strongest units in the game. Now, what is cool about this is they have artifacts. Now, an artifact is pretty much these items that you can get throughout the game through neither drops, or there's actually a store in here where you can buy units and items, and that's pretty much with all the money you can. Pretty much what you want to do is buy all the items in the game and then get the units that you would actually want to have. So when you get these artifacts, it will either raise strength, raise magic, but there's always usually a negative that goes with it. So if you raise your magic by some, it's going to lower your strength by some. And what's cool is that artifacts themselves go off the cap level of how many people you can have in the unit. Now, remember I was saying that you can eventually level up these leaders to have more people in your actual barracks, or, well, you know, your unit in general. So let's say that, you know, you already have an established unit that you don't want to put any more people in. You know, it does exactly what it needs to do. So what you can do is you can go into the artifacts and you can really have more in-depth abilities and have a lot more customization to that unit that does exactly what you want it to do. For instance, if you really like archers on here and you decided to go out there and get a leader that gives special perks to an archer, and you can do that. Leaders on here, certain of them have special unique abilities that if they're a leader, their entire unit gets. And that gives you even more customization on top of the artifacts, on top of the class system that they have on the individual characters that's in the unit. And that's what I think really captivates and elevates this game among a lot of the other type of games like this, is the way you want to play it. If you don't want to use archers, you don't got to use archers, but I don't really suggest that. I'd suggest that you really get comfortable with everything in this game and really find out what exactly works for you, and you got to really know what they're using too. You know, one thing I will say about the gameplay in Symphony of War is they do not hold your hand. There's a lot of very, very tough battles in this game, especially some areas in the game where they'll put indestructible units pretty much. They might as well be indestructible. They know that you are not reasonably able to take on those units, and they will literally say in the battle, look, this dude is too strong for you, run, don't try to fight him. And I like stuff like that. It gives a little bit more of a, you know, an edge when you're playing these games and find more of a, you know, a risk and demand that's on this. Sure, you can try to go ahead and go up here and get more of these resources, because there are resources scattered throughout the maps. You know, there'll be caves, there'll be houses in general. But what's nice is, like, they'll put these units on the map that show up eventually. They don't show up a lot, but when they do show up, they give you, like, look, you can go up here and get these resources, but if this dude catches up to you, it's a wrap. And most of the time, it's not really good to fight these people. You want to just go ahead and run. One thing I don't like about the gameplay of this is if the main character dies, it's game over. I don't like that with these type of games. If you're playing as an army and as multiple units, I don't really understand why they would take it to where if one unit goes down, and I understand it's the main character, that the entire game is over. Maybe give you enough time to go over there and revive them. I feel like, you know, healing and factors in general should have been improved a little bit in this game. Now, I'm not saying it was like horrible or anything, but pretty much how it went is if you had a mage in your team, you can heal one time per turn outside of battle. And pretty much if you had mages in your unit, they would heal people throughout the actual battles. But if you had a unit that's in your actual platoon got really injured and you had to heal them outside of the battle, you'd have to go to these like churches throughout the maps that would either revive someone on your unit, or they would actually replenish the heals that particular unit had. So that's what I'm pretty much like. It's the only real big criticism I can get for it. And I don't even think it's like a huge criticism. It's just like, look, next time if you do any kind of updates, or maybe you make a sequel to this, be a little bit more open to healing in general, because I do feel like it would get frustrating for a lot of new people coming into this genre, or people that's not experienced in it, that, you know, maybe their team isn't lit, maybe their units are a little bit offset, and I feel like there's gonna be a lot of aggravation for people if they don't really understand the mechanics. And I understand that's not really necessarily the developer's fault, but sometimes you got to understand that when people go on there and they, you know, maybe impulse buy your game, you need to be a little bit more open to what goes on. One thing I will say that I didn't really like about this was the lack of voice acting. Now, there are some voice acting in this game when you pick a certain, you know, character on the battlefield. Sometimes they will make some form of voice. Now, I understand, I've made this criticism in past games before, that I understand that voice acting isn't cheap, but it's just like certain games like this, when you're listening to the dialogue, it's a lot better when you actually hear a voice and you put someone's voice to the actual character. And on this, it's pretty much like you just read. And I'm not saying that's not bad, but we're in 2022. I don't know how hard it is to maybe have the developers read for it. And, you know, when it comes to that, maybe they should have a text, because not everyone should be able to do that voice acting. And I think maybe bad voice acting is actually worse than just reading it out loud. I get, you know, finances, budget. I feel like the biggest thing that held this game back was the budget. You know, voice acting, some animations could have been better, but all that's really nitpicking besides the voices. I do feel like voice acting would have took this game to a completely different level. Another thing I thought was actually cool with the gameplay on there is if you get certain enemy units down to a certain point, you can actually make them surrender instead of killing them. And what will happen is if they surrender to you, you can pretty much sell them back to the army that you are fighting. And I think that's cool. You know, it's a little unique way of actually getting a little bit more money. Now, I think that maybe you should have been able to, in certain scenarios, actually recruit some of these people that have surrendered, because there was a lot of times where I wanted to try out a certain, you know, build, or, you know, a certain unit setup, and I couldn't do it because a lot of the requirements takes a couple minutes. Now, normally they're not too bad, but there are a couple of the level 3 classes and stuff that, you know, you need like a strength of 47, and sometimes I would be like 3 or 4 off. And you can use items. There's like apples and, you know, certain, you know, consumable items to increase certain stats on these units. But it was a little annoying because when I would want to go back and I would be like, all right, let me get 3 people with shields, put them on the front. Let me see how this works with these certain people on the front. There's a lot of customization, and I felt like the customization was halted a little bit by, you know, the progression in general in the game. And that's not really anything bad on the game. It's just I felt like I would have liked to experiment a little bit more if that was able to. But, you know, that's pretty much my review on Symphony of War. It's like I said, I actually think this is a phenomenal game, and I think it's easily worth the money that you put into it. I think it's $20 on Steam. I'm hoping it comes to consoles. I think this game would actually do really well on Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox. I think this is definitely a successor of Final Fantasy Tactics and, you know, Ogres. I think if you love those games even a little bit, like even a little bit, this is your game for you, and it's 20 bucks. Go out here and support these devs. They made a fantastic game. All you have to do is go look at the Steam reviews, man. It's overwhelmingly positive. You don't see a game like that. You know, you go through there, you look at the reviews, the majority of them are positive. And I'll tell you guys right now, as being a fan of those type of Ogre tactics and Final Fantasy tactics, this game is so good. It might be one of the best games I've played in 2022. I definitely think it's worth 20 bucks. I got about 30 hours in it, so I think that right there, just 30 hours for 20 bucks is insane. Now, I did get a review code, so keep that in mind, but I would easily pay 20 bucks for this game. But that's the review of Symphony of the War. Like I said, fantastic story. We were, you know, could have used a little bit more in visual department. It has a decent artwork style, but I do feel like the animations, everything could have been completely reworked. You know, and obviously that comes with budget. Voice acting could have been there, obviously budget as well. Story was amazing, gameplay was amazing. Pretty much this game is an amazing game, and I think you guys should go out there and get it. If you guys enjoyed this review, you can always hit that like button. We make pretty much reviews every month. We actually have podcasts. We have a podcast every Sunday at 1 p.m, the Iron Lords podcast, and then we have the Addict Show, which I host myself every Wednesday at 5 p.m. I hope all of you guys had a good day, and until the next review, this is Lord Addict. I'm out of here. Peace.